This podcast is brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who make and drink great spirits. Join our free email newsletter for technical and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Learn more at spiritsanddistilling.com.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. My name is Sydney. I am here with my new friend Bob Dillon today. He is the owner, distiller, and in his words, liquorist of one of my new favorite craft producers, Dismal Harmony Distilling in Morristown, New Jersey. And we're going to talk today about why you need to know who Dismal Harmony is and what they produce. They make some extraordinarily amazing liqueurs that have me absolutely enraptured. We're going to talk about how cocktails and bartending take a place within what they make and how they produce. And we're also going to talk about some fun legal things that happen in New Jersey as far as direct-to-consumer shipping. This is episode number 30. I cannot believe that we're there. But we are going to have a great conversation today. Before we get into all of that, however, G&D Chillers understands that each distillery's chilling requirements are unique. On every distillery project, G&D offers the front-end design and engineering your team needs at no cost to you. Hank Presley, head distiller at Moondrop Distillery, says, "Early on, we made a decision to partner with quality American-made companies. One of those companies was G&D Chillers, and we are proud of that choice. Our equipment from them has run long and strong. We put our first barrel in our rickhouse in September 2021, and over the past 3 years, we have put back more than 540 barrels. What a great decision to team up with a company like G&D Chillers. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com. Hi, Bob.
Hey, Sydney.
Thank you so much for coming on today. So for those who are listening, a little backstory of how Bob and I met. We finally came face to face in Tucson at the American Craft Spirits Association conference. Maybe that was like a month ago now, 3 weeks ago now. Time is a construct. Yesterday. It's not real. It feels like it was yesterday, but also a very long time ago at the same time. But I finally met Bob at ACSA. Bob did not know this, but I was a huge fan of Bob, knew a lot about him because I had the very distinct pleasure of tasting some of the spirits that Bob submitted to the American Craft Spirits Association spirits competition that I helped judge at this past year in Washington, D.C. I did the distilled spirit specialty table. I was judging that table with a group of really cool people. And I think it's because I presented a topic on DSS at ACSA the year before. And they're like, Sydney, she's DSS girl. She's going to go to the DSS table and taste all the really weird, cool things over there. And
you're typecast.
Exactly, a little bit. And that is where I came across this extraordinary liqueur that not only did I become very obsessed with, but everyone became very obsessed with at spirits tasting. And it ended up winning the whole damn thing. It won everything. You swept ACSA. Yeah. A liqueur, an Indian spice flavored liqueur, won the big tuna. And that's a huge accomplishment. That's gigantic. Yeah.
I haven't fully processed it yet.
So I knew I had to have Bob on the show, wanted to talk to him a little bit more about his business, all of the incredible things that he produces, because he submitted a few things to judging and wanted to get to know him a little bit more and showcase all of the extraordinary things that he does in New Jersey. So Bob, can you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about your background. Tell us about Dismal Harmony.
Sure. Let me just start up how you can reach me if you want to is bob@dismalharmony.com. That's same as our website, dismalharmony.com. So you can go check that out. My background, I'm in engineering by training. My undergraduate degree is in computer engineering. I did software, hardware development for a number of years. Then I switched into product because, I worked with an amazing group of engineers, like really top shelf engineers. And I held my own, but I could see that there were some engineers I was just never going to be as good as they are. they mind meld with the damn thing and could figure things out like very quickly. But so I was glad to hang with them. But what I had that they didn't have was I could explain really complex things to anybody. I could talk to PhDs, or I could talk to my mother, and I could explain things at that level. So I switched into more of a business role. Started a semiconductor company in the late 90s. We put Ethernet over the electric wires in a house. That went belly up after the first dot-com bust in the early 2000s. I went back to school. I got an MBA from Columbia University. That was an incredible gift because I was old enough to know why I was getting an education, and the market was bad enough that I wasn't giving anything up because there was no jobs for 37-year-old ex-CEOs, right? And after that, I went to work for a company. We built the HD radio system, which is the AM/FM digital radio system. I built the licensing practice for our semiconductor partners, and I'm really an engineer at heart. I learned business, but I'm really an engineer. I think like a scientist. It's my joy. I got bored in a business role, and so I started doing some engineering work. I started another company. I used machine learning and artificial intelligence. This is 2012. It's not in 2012. It's not what it is now. There was a lot of tinkering, but I was able to build a system that would ingest children's text messages from Facebook or their cell phone or whatever, and I could detect bullying, sexual predation, and suicide risk with fairly high accuracy. There was a marketing lesson there that it was a technical success, but it was a market failure because while I was building it, you explain it to people and they go, "Oh my God, everybody should have that thing." Well, everybody should have that for their kids. And what they really meant was everybody but me should have it for their kids because I don't have the stomach for it. And so, and then, the Edward Snowden disclosures turned people from security crazy to privacy crazy, and having spyware for all intents and purposes. Anyway, it didn't succeed, but it was technically successful, and I learned a lot about machine learning and artificial intelligence and web services and all those techie things. But I took all that learning and I created a business inside of the company that I was working at, and I worked with with one engineer in particular, and we built a new business that eventually grew, and it's now one of the three main products for a publicly traded technology company. If you look up my name, you could probably find it. So that was fairly successful. So that leads me to where I am now. But so I was thinking about retirement, and you can probably tell from my background that I like to stay active. I like to start companies. I love love business, love products, love teams, all those things. And as I think about retirement, I don't want to retire. I want to do something. And back in 2016, 2017, I started messing with distilling. It was a curiosity to me. Like you're sipping whiskey as we're speaking. And when I would do that, I just like you're having this sensory experience that's like almost spiritual, right? And you're like, how the hell did that come out of a seed? Right? How did that come out of a seed? How? What magic and alchemy creates whiskey from a seed? So I started, looking into it, and I got hooked. And I have a saying: don't start something you're not prepared to overdo. I decided that in my retirement, I wanted to own a distillery. And I also realized when you work in corporate, which I did, I was a senior vice president of a publicly traded company, pretty senior, a lot of responsibility, a lot of, managing a lot of people, good sized budget, all that. But even at that level, you don't decide when it's over. The company decides when it's over. And I know that. And so I started thinking about opening a distillery. And then COVID hit. And I saw an opportunity. Because, one thing you learn with business and startups in particular is that when things go wrong in the marketplace, it's opportunity. There's going to be change. Like when there's a big shock to the market, like COVID was, you're going to come out of it a different market. And there's going to be new winners and there's going to be losers that were used to be winners. And so if you're going to start a business, that's the time to do it. So I started opening a distillery. And we were fortunate, Morristown, New Jersey, most of your listeners will not be familiar with, but it's kind of like a third tier city. It's not New York City. It's not Newark. It's not Jersey City. It's a third tier city in New Jersey, but it's affluent. It's a worldly city. It's commutable to Manhattan. So you've got, very, very deep influence from Manhattan. It's a great city for a distillery, right? And so I wanted to open in the downtown. I was able to get a building that I never would be able to get now, right? Because nobody was leasing anything during COVID. So what I didn't count on, I was figuring to come out of COVID, everybody's going to start wanting lots of restaurants, and we're going to be ready for it. It took 4 years to get open. And we didn't open until March 7th of 2024. So we're open. We're open a year. Yeah. So that's our background.
You're open a year and you win everything at the American Craft Spirits Association conference. You win Distilled Spirit Specialty Best in Show. You win the Innovation Award for Most Innovative Spirit that we had seen. And then you won Best in Show of the whole damn thing. You beat out brandy. You beat out gin. You beat out whiskey. We tasted hundreds of whiskeys, and you beat out all of them with Vidisha's Masala liqueur. And I remember tasting it and thinking how absolutely inspired it was. It really, like, every single person at my table was just absolutely knocked on their ass by it. We can curse on this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm talking really
there
slow to avoid it.
Yeah. So it became such a cool experience for us. And then to learn that you had only been in business for a year, your background sounds so technical, but your spirits, Vidisha's, and then your chartreuse alternative that I tasted as well. And I believe you submitted a coffee liqueur too, correct?
No, just those two this time around.
Okay, just those two. Definitely, I remember Vidisha's because it was the star, but I also absolutely love the chartreuse alternative. And both of those felt very inspired, very artistic, very, very, as you kind of said, magical. There almost was like a mystical element to them. Yeah. How do you balance kind of this very technical side of your brain with these beautiful pieces of art that you created that are like an olfactory experience?
Well, that's what I like doing, right? I mean, people think of computer technology as super precise, and it has to be for somebody, right? The coders, it's got to be, you got to be precise. But for the product person, you're doing those balances and those trade-offs as well. If you've ever used a product. That's why Apple was such a revelation, because before Apple, these engineers would design the products, and they worked like an engineer designed the product, like Windows was wonky as hell. DOS was wonky as hell. But before I went to engineering school, I was a musician. I was a musician since I'm a child. I took 4 years off between high school and college and just played in, bands. And growing up in New Jersey in the early 80s, it was a hot seat. I mean, people I know, friends of mine, acquaintances, are in Skid Row. They're in, Ozzy Osbourne's band. John Bon Jovi came out. It was really cool time and a place to be a musician. And you'll appreciate it, but your audience, well, these were all hair bands, because bald as a cue ball now. But
Bob has very long, flowing, beautiful, shiny hair. For those who are listening and can't see him,
and it's in a case in a drawer in my bedroom. But music is that. Music has. If you ever heard an engineer, a lot of engineers play music, but they're very precise, and it just doesn't have any soul. And there are a lot of people who can play with a lot of soul, but they don't kind of understand that. The great ones are the ones who have both the technical and the soul, and they blend them seamlessly. Like, I'm a drummer, so to me, Steve Gadd, Simon Phillips, Bernard Purdy, these are just people who just have both. They have the technical precision, and they've got the soul. And distilling, you need both. You know, you've probably had some technically precise whiskeys that you just go, yeah, that was tight, but you know, it didn't move my heart. You know, so I like both of those. So I do like to experiment, and but there is a science and there is a structure, and you have to be repeatable, and you have to, the TTB likes you to be precise, right? So, and it's a business at the end of the day. It has to make money, or you can't keep doing it.
Amen.
So
gotta pay the bills.
You got to pay the bills, right? And this is my retirement. So, interesting thing. Just to, if I could just go back to an earlier point, I said to you the reason I started in 2020 is because you don't decide when you retire; the company does, right? I got laid off a week before. I got a call from the ACSA that I really should come out to the to the. So it's just it played out that way. But your question was, the blend of, I like the blend of the artistic and those people I told you about, those amazing engineers that I could look at and say I was never going to be that good. I was never going to be that precisely good. But I was 95% as good as they were, but I could also engage customers and explain to them and get customer feedback and fold it in, and we had a better product for that's the artistic side of it, the human side. I love that. That's what I look for. I look for things that are, because I am both. So I look for something that's both.
Yeah, 1,000%. And, some of the most incredible professionals that I've met and worked with in my career have an artistic background, and they are able to balance it with their very technical side. I mean, Paul Letgo, the founder of Few, he has an incredible musical tie to Few, and that's how they've done so many musical collaborations. I work with a gentleman right now in my role at Heaven Hill who is an incredible programmer who is doing a lot of our automation, and he is also a professional musician. I'm going to send this to him. Shout out to Colin. He's great. But yeah, it makes sense to have these two different sides and to balance them, because that's what alcohol is. It is science. It is art. And you kind of need that copacetic mingling of those two to create something that people can connect with.
Right.
So you have this very engineer mind, very technical, and it sounds like you've done work with, automation. You've definitely done work with AI. Walk me through building out a craft distillery from your perspective, because I would love to know kind of your setup, what you're running. To my listeners, a lot of the people I interview on this podcast, I know what they're running, but I'm very curious to hear, Bob, what you guys are working with in your facility. Sure.
So, I only know my own distillery and the people and others that I've met, but the idea that I have in my head about how people start distilleries is they have a process, and then they go find a building that fits the process, right? Or a workflow, or whatever you want to call it. I didn't do it that way. I did it the other way around. I found a building, and then I created a layout and workflows that were achievable in the building. We wanted to be in the downtown of a city. I think one of the better decisions that I made is, as I thought about the business, right? I kind of looked around at all the craft distilleries near me and the people that I knew, because I started meeting distillers, and
we're a weird bunch to meet.
No, it's a very cool bunch. Well, I like weird people. I hope to be weird too.
Same.
But I noticed that a lot of the distilleries out of the chute need to be in distribution, right? I didn't want to do that. That felt really scary to me. That felt like a dart throw that you either hit a bullseye or you're dead. So the centerpiece of our business right now is our tasting room, and it's a high-end, elegant craft cocktail bar. Essentially, it's a bar in a town that really likes good food, and will pay money for cuisine. And I was very, very fortunate to be able to attract one of the best mixologists in our state to join us years before we actually got open. Robbie Seibert, who's just a genius, just a savant. with cocktails. And he's encyclopedic with spirits and cocktail history, and he's just a once in a generation kind of a talent. And so we still get people like in our tasting room. You can kind of look through a window and you could see our still. Look through a door and see our still, and we still get a lot of comments. People are surprised to find out that we're a distillery. They think we're just a great cocktail bar, and they say, "Oh, is that what that spaceship is there is for?" It's like they came to a distillery, had no idea what it was. They just heard we make really amazing drinks, and they came in for the drinks. So the reason that works is because as a business, it's a decent business. Having we found a niche in this town where there's a lot of really good restaurants. There are bars that run the gamut from what I call mating centers, if you know what I mean, like where young people go to mate. And anything from there to there's one restaurant and development in our town that just makes these great cocktails, right? But there was nothing that was just this great cocktail, New York's major city style cocktail room, and that's what we built. That takes the pressure off the distilling end, and that takes the pressure off of the distribution part. I could take my time and figure it out. But when we were talking before we got started, like that's what's on my mind now. How do I figure out distribution? But I've got the time to figure it out because we're doing okay. We're keeping our nose above water in the tasting room. So there's not this urgency, and we can go out and we could go to the best cocktail bars in our state and line them up and work down the food chain from there. It gave us a lot of breathing room.
Yeah.
But your question was you asked about the distillery. So I wanted to be in the middle of a city, and being in the middle of a city to create that tasting room means that you're building a distillery in the middle of a city, and the rents are high, the space is scarce. So I put a huge premium on packing things in really tightly. And the second thing is I wanted a distillery where I could run the whole thing myself. If I had help, that's great, but I wanted to be able to do everything myself. And so I just worked out the workflows in a way that I could do that. And we have a ground floor and we have a basement. And the ground floor is split 70-30, 30% of it being for the distillery and 70% is the tasting room. And then in the basement, it's all distillery that we share some of it with the bar for prep and refrigeration and ice and all that. But so upstairs, I have my still, which is a 400 liter DYE still. One of the benefits of taking 4 years to get open is that you've got a lot of time to do your sourcing. And I have some experience with working with Chinese companies and all that. So I would have loved to have gotten an American still, but it wasn't going to be in the budget because my wife and I funded the whole thing out of our pocket.
And there's some there's awesome options now that I've heard a lot of people who use the Chinese distills very successfully. It's how you use them and how you take care of them ultimately.
Yes. And I probably could have found an even less expensive Chinese still, but I went with DYE because I like the idea that they've got an office here, and in talking, they were very responsive, and they're very good. And it's a very, very good still, and I'm happy with it. I originally bought just a pot still, because I was going to just do liqueurs. I'm going to source all my aged spirits. We have I think 12 products or 14 products, and I'm a one-man show. I'm not, if I could source something, if I could find a bourbon, you can. It's as good or better than I can make, and it's less expensive. I'm going to go make a liqueur instead of trying to make the next great bourbon.
It's a hot market for bourbon right now too. Bulk bourbon, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I got my still it's 400 liters. It started out as a pot still. In the early days of trying to get my state license, I drew a short straw on my agent at the ABC, and she just was turning the screws. And one of the things she insisted on is notwithstanding the fact that it's not in the legislation that I have to make. I'm not allowed to source. So it's like, well, I didn't plan for a mash tun, and I didn't plan for a rectification column. So Now I have to redo my layout. So I have a mash tun upstairs, and I had to add a rectification column, and I had to get that fabricated into the new layout. And so that's what's upstairs. What's also upstairs is a lot of my spirits, Vidishas included, is done through extraction, and I do my extraction through percolation. And I try to use gravity wherever I can instead of a pump. I'd rather move stuff around by gravity than a pump. It just makes cleaning easier. It's safer.
It's safe. We hate fire. We hate static electricity. Yeah, 1,000%.
Right. So having 2 levels helps with that. And so I do extraction with percolation, and I bought some equipment, actually parts from from extractors for THC from cannabis. Right. There's some really cool equipment, and the cannabis stuff is doing really cool stuff. But I made just a simple percolator, and I have an industrial rack, like a warehouse pallet rack, and I put a tote up at the top of that rack, and the percolator it's just a 4-foot by 1 foot stainless steel spool with a bowl at the bottom and a filter. Right. I have a couple of different filters, and a 400 mesh filter is incredibly fine. So I load up the botanicals into that percolator, and the alcohol sits, and I retrofit a 2-foot or a 1 foot by 1 foot spool with a tank valve, like a toilet bowl tank valve. And so it runs the neutral in and fills up to that tank valve and just holds it there. And it just trickles it through. And I have a Blickman valve, a sparging valve on the bottom of that bowl. And then I just adjust it, and it trickles it ever so slowly. I also, when I was developing the liqueurs, the ones that need extraction, I did a deep dive on herbal medicines, because, the production of herbal medicines, they make tinctures, right? And there's one in particular, I don't know his name. If anybody's interested, just shoot me an email and I'll get you. But there's an herbalist book, and his voice is incredibly annoying, but he really knows what he's doing. And I learned how to do this.
People say the same thing about me. Her voice is incredibly annoying, but sometimes she knows what she's doing. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
I'll send you the video. You're not annoying. I'll show you what annoying is. But he really knows his stuff. Very eccentric, very weird. So I probably would like him. But he's got a book, and he teaches you how to do extractions, and he runs through hundreds and hundreds of botanicals and what the right extraction ABV is, and all these things. But it's all in the context of herbal medicine, right? Which, not my thing. But the techniques are all really good. So I created this, he on his YouTube video, he recommends taking a 1.75 liter bottle and cut the bottom off of it with a tile saw. And that's how I started. You stuff cotton balls in it, you turn it upside down, and you just, with a little needle valve that you get at Home Depot, I could just drip it out. And then I replaced that eventually with little 4-inch and 2-inch spools. And then I could scale that to my big system at the distillery. So now I'm doing all my development on the little 2-inch spools, 4-inch spools, and then I immediately just scale it to the distillery, and it works.
Do you find that it scales linearly, or do you have to continue to make these adjustments? Because I know making gin, like when you do these smaller distillations, it does not always translate up to a larger batch.
I've been fortunate. I had pretty much all the products that I have now when we launched. And I developed them all either on those little, extractors that I was telling you about, or I developed them on a 2-liter glass, borosilicate glass lab still. And I had only one recipe that didn't scale perfectly. And I got it the second time. So
better to be lucky than good. That's what I always say. Better to be lucky than good. Yeah.
Choose luck every time. Give it
every
a chance.
time.
Because you always get good. You can't get lucky. Right. So I got this extractor in this second floor in the still room. And what I do is, I've told you, I've got the alcohol goes up on the top of that pallet rack. It drips down through the percolator, and I've got ports in the floor of the second floor. And down in the basement, I put a receiver, and a hose that goes down to the basement. So it starts at the top of that rack, trickles through the percolator, down through the floor, and collects in the basement. So that's how I do my extractions. I do the Vedicias on that. I do my Amaro on that. I do my limoncello on that. And I do my cold brew coffee. I'm going to stop doing the cold brew on there. It doesn't work that well.
Do you do gin that way as well?
No.
Okay,
No,
I was going to ask. I've never heard of this. I've never used a percolator for distilled spirits. I've used it for coffee and with not great success at that either. So I'm very intrigued. I've worked with Rotovap technology a little bit, and it sounds very interesting, the quality of botanical flavor that you can get through, because I've tried Vedicias, I've tried your chartreuse alternative, and those flavors are so fresh and they're there in a very authentic way. And that's why I love rotary evaporators, because you get a similar effect. It's very fresh, but there's some question about how long those flavors can last with their volatility. Do they blow off after a period of time? I'm really intrigued by this percolator idea, though.
Yeah.
And I love that you got it from a THC industry. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting conversations happening with marijuana and extractives and things like that. And why not take their technology and make it work for you?
Yep. And, you said you're from the service industry, and some bar you worked at, you made tinctures, right? And you probably did maceration.
Macerations. We were maceration city. And in my career as well, working with gin, I did quite a bit of maceration.
And so it probably took you anywhere from 2 weeks to a month to get the maceration, right? With this system, either on my little scale, I could do a liter. I could do a couple of liters. Like now I have a 2-inch spool, a 4-inch spool, a 6-inch spool at the distillery, and the 12-inch spool at the distillery. So I could do any kind of scale I want. And I do an extraction in anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. And there's a whole science there that's just absolutely fascinating. That guy with the annoying voice explains it really well in this video. But the idea is maceration. When you start extracting, you've got this, like if you think of it in terms of electricity, you got positive and negative, you got that difference of potential, and that's what draws the current across that difference in potential. Higher the difference, the more current you get. And it's the same thing with extracting oils from plants, is when you throw the plants into alcohol, you've got this huge difference in potential, or difference, right? You've got a plant's full of oil and you've got a vat full of alcohol, and they're just completely separate. And as soon as the plants hit the alcohol, the oil starts to come out of them because it's dissolving into the alcohol. And now instead of having plants with oil and a vat with alcohol, now you've got plants mostly with oil and some alcohol. Now you've got a vat that's mostly alcohol with some oils, right? And as time progresses, that balance shifts to where it's all the oil is out of the, but as it progresses, the rate of extraction is determined by the difference in how much oil is in the plant versus in the alcohol. Once it starts absorbing the alcohol, it starts slowing down how fast it's absorbing it. So what the percolator does, and this percolator is not recirculating like a coffee percolator. This is just straight through. But when you fill the thing with alcohol, you do it in such a way that you don't disturb the botanical bed. And by doing that, you've got pure alcohol at all times. Like I could see straight through, I could see 4 feet to the bottom of the percolator, and I could see the botanicals, right? It's perfectly clear. And so you always have that situation when you're throwing the botanicals into fresh alcohol. It's always getting exposed to fresh alcohol, and that gradient is always maximal. What makes a maceration take so long is you get to the long tail where at that last 50% takes forever. Like I'm always surprised when you do a maceration, you throw them in there, you come down the next day, go, oh my God, I'm almost done. Look how dark it is, right? Bullshit. A month later, you're done. If you can keep the alcohol pure, it's always extracting at that rate when you threw it in the first moment. So that's what that my percolator does, is it's always keeping fresh alcohol in contact and always getting that maximal extraction rate. And so you're getting a high quality extraction, and you're cutting the time way, way down because you're always extracting at that maximal rate.
I mean, it makes sense, especially, the bulk of my career now is focused on whiskey production. That's why we get the bulk of our flavor and well, not the bulk of it, but a ton of flavor and a ton of color in your first year of a Kentucky bourbon's
Exactly.
maturation, because
Exactly.
it's just, 1,000%, it's trying to hit equilibrium.
Right.
Fascinating. No, I love that.
So, but you mentioned the monk. The monk is done on the still. That's a distilled spirit.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the monk, because you going through your products, you have Vidisha's Masala liqueur, which is such a unique standalone product. It is this gorgeous ode to Indian spices. It's incredible. It's otherworldly. We all fell in love with it. All of ACSA fell in love with it. I think I watched people drink 4 bottles within the span of 2 hours. That was awesome.
So happy.
But then you have, the Monk American Herbal Liqueur, and you have, a limoncello, you have a triple sec kind of alternative, and you have a very cocktail mindful portfolio.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to a buddy of mine who's been on this podcast, Ken. He was last season. I met Ken when he was distilling in Savannah, and in Georgia, you had to distill every drop of alcohol that went into your cocktail bar. So if you wanted to make a Negroni, you needed to make your aperitif, and you needed to produce a fortified wine. And the only thing I think they didn't have to make was Angostura. But your portfolio kind of reminded me so much of what he did.
It's the same constraints. It's the exact same constraints.
Exactly. He did it very well. And I love this new trend of chartreuse alternatives that are hitting the market, because you are seeing it is a chartreuse alternative. It's not chartreuse, but you're seeing Americans kind of take their own spin at it. And it's just because of supply and demand. I don't think you would ever see anyone trying to flood the market with chartreuse alternatives, but bartenders are demanding it. Drinkers are demanding it, because the home bartender got crafty during COVID. And now you have an American perspective on green and yellow chartreuse. And I think that's so cool. I'd love to hear more about your monk and how you kind of went down that rabbit hole, because it is a rabbit hole going down the chartreuse.
It is. And, like you talk about the alternatives like Faccio Brutto or Genepi. And, those are spirits that were developed for their own reasons in their own time frame. And when, chartreuse supply went the way it went, they were there. My point is, they weren't designed to be chartreuse replacements, right? They just, the window opened. I designed mine to be a chartreuse replacement. And honestly, I didn't know that there was a chartreuse shortage when I started making Monk. And there probably wasn't a chartreuse shortage when I started making Monk. I had the same experience with chartreuse that I had with whiskey. Like, what the hell's going on in my mouth right now? And how the hell did anybody get that from plants? How? And then I went down the rabbit hole just out of pure curiosity. I wanted to be able to replicate that. That to me was the holy grail. If you can make chartreuse, you know how to make liqueur.
That's the pinnacle. Chartreuse.
Yeah.
See,
so
chartreuse is that for me, and then Fernet as well. Fernet is also the big white whale that people like to chase.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I set out to learn how to make chartreuse in an effort to learn how to make liqueur. And I just did a lot of research because, like you said, there was a lot of DIY, and you could find a lot of, do-it-yourself chartreuse recipes. And then I didn't find them, chartreuse is such a refined spirit, and you're not going to get that through extraction. I don't think you're going to get that refinement. One of the things about Vidisha's is that it's meaty, right? It's meaty. It's a little chewy, and you get.
And I remember telling you that I love Vidisha's mouthfeel. Like you really like it sits. It is. Yeah. It almost feels like a physical thing on your palate, not just like a liquid. It almost takes on a shape.
And I think mouth. Maceration does that. And if you want to get the chartreuse, you need to distill, because you really need to define those. To have that definition, that refinement, that double distillation produces. So the DIY stuff really wasn't working because it's all maceration, because it's DIY. They don't have stills, mostly. But I did a lot of research and tried to see if I could find anything in the literature. One thing science taught me is always start with the literature. You don't do anything yourself. You always stand on the shoulder of the people who came before you, right? And I found this amazing book. It's the guy who wrote its name was Duplay.
Is it the
It was-
green book? The giant green book?
Maybe.
There's I cannot remember the name of it, but there's this gigantic green tome that has a ton of recipes for a ton of different, but it's very hard to read and hard to translate because it's in old timey language and recipes.
This one's not that. This one is written. This is in French, and it was written in France in the mid 1800s or in the 1850s. The first edition. And it was translated in the 1890s into English by an American, and it's been since recognized by the Library of Congress as a work of cultural significance. I don't know what honors that and privileges that bestows on the long dead author, but
it's a hardback. It's not a paperback.
It's definitely it's a hardback. Yeah, I ended up buying a copy of it from and having it sent here, but just because it's. And what a few things struck me, and I didn't know anything about liqueur at this time, right? I now know that there are these French liqueur houses, like Gaffard, that just make these spectacular, amazing array of liqueurs, and that was something common that came out of France, best I can tell. That was a thing in France, and this book was the documentation at that moment in the mid 1800s of. The state of that development of that industry. But what was surprising to me now looking back on it is so much of the technique in that book is absolutely fresh. Some of this equipment is outdated, but the technique is there and the careabouts are there and how you get to certain things is there. I learned a lot of technique from that book. But one of the things that's in it is, again, if you study the history of chartreuse, it goes back 400 years. But the commercialization of chartreuse happened in the mid 1800s. That's when the company got set up. That's when they began selling it to the public and not just using it at the monastery for medicinal purposes. So this book was written at the time that they were commercializing chartreuse. They began commercializing chartreuse. And there's 3 chartreuse recipes in that book. And there's a green, a yellow, and a white chartreuse recipe in that. And I'm going to do the white one. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it.
I have so many questions about the white one.
Oh my God. Yes. And I can't answer them yet, unfortunately. But there's a tremendous, just endless recipes and tinctures and waters and endless. It's just endless. And they'll take the tinctures and they'll have like a poor man's maraschino. And they'll build it up from a raspberry distillate and a cherry distillate and some rose water, and it's an amazingly cool book. And I got lost in that book, and I kept working on the chartreuse, and eventually I got what is now Monk, bringing it to modern equipment and whatnot, and not being in France, which botanicals could I source versus who knows what the hell they were using in France in the mid they were in the Alpine region where these things are grown.
My next question would be, when you're researching all these things and you think you have a liqueur you want to play with, maybe the white, for example, are you running into any roadblocks with GRAS and generally recognized as safe ingredients that maybe...
Yes.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah,
definitely. That's a good intro.
Freaking FDA, man.
And that's a good intro to my New Jersey now afternoon tea gin. But just to close out the chartreuse one, there's the two things you run into there. First of all, it's a translation from French. And with my Amaro, I was working from an Italian text from a similar time period, and you do the translation, and it took me forever to realize that one word actually meant cinnamon, and it was the Cassia version of cinnamon. Like, oh, it's China. Is that what you mean? Okay. So you just have these translation things. What was available then versus what's available now, and they'll use imprecise language, and you have to figure out what did they really mean? Is it the leaves? Is it the flowers? Is it whatever? So it just takes time to work through all of that. So the story with we have a product now called Afternoon Tea Gin that started life as New Jersey Tea Gin, and one spring day, my wife and I were hiking in the woods, and as happens on hikes in the woods, we got hit in the face with this fragrance because it was spring and everything was blossoming. And we're like, oh my God, what the hell's that? And we hunted it down and we found this blossoming tree. And I took a bunch of blossoms and I took a bunch of leaves and I took them home. And I researched it and found out that was a plant called the New Jersey tea plant. And that plant, where it got its name, is during the American Revolution. Before the American Revolution, there was the Townsend Act, and then there was the Boston Tea Party, and then that begat the Revolutionary War. And all access to the American ports got cut off, so that the colonies weren't getting tea. So the colonists went looking for a substitute, and they found this plant we now call the New Jersey tea plant. I'm guessing they found it in New Jersey, but that's just a hunch. And this plant, when you brew these leaves, it brews like tea, it smells like tea, and it tastes like tea. It just doesn't have caffeine. So this is what the colonists used as a tea substitute when they couldn't get tea into the colonies through the Revolutionary War, and it was called New Jersey tea. I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is an amazing botanical. The story, it could taste like urine. I'm using it because that story is so good, you know? So I made a gin from tea. And another whole story how I formulated that gin. But I was decided I'm using that botanical.
Yeah.
So now I've got this great gin that I love. And it's got the tea note is coming from this New Jersey tea plant. And I hired some foragers, and I got hundreds of kilograms of this New Jersey tea leaves and all that. I submit my formula to the TTB. They went,
no.
New Jersey tea? Like, are you
No.
crazy?
You mean like the New Jersey devil? No.
And the root of this tea, as red root. So parts of this plant are TTB, FDA approved, but not the leaf. And so they shot down. I'm like, oh my God. And as mad as I was a little bit glad that somebody was watching out, because like a moron like me just walks into the woods and tears a bush out of the ground and serves it to the public. I'm glad that they think that through a little bit, because, could have people in Morristown with their heads swollen up like pumpkins. So it got shot down. So I ended up substituting it for just black tea, and that's how I got black tea into that. Funny story. I had this whole write-up, just like I just told you, the Townsend Act and the colonists with their tea. And then when they turned it down, now I had to write new copy. And I preserved a lot of that copy, and I wrote, and so behind the flavor notes of cardamom and juniper, you're going to smell the irony of substituting tea for New Jersey tea. And they shot that copy down. I guess I pissed somebody off at the TTB that day. But yeah, so that's how I got the tea into there, because I developed the gin around the New Jersey tea botanical that I ended up not being able to use.
I'm getting flashbacks of the time when I was working on the gin that I made in Florida, and we had some foraged sumac in it, and the state of Florida was like, that's poisonous. The FDA was like, can you prove that's actually eatable sumac and not the sumac that like will hurt you? Yeah. Man,
Yeah.
GRAS is a difficult one to navigate, especially with these older spirits that utilize things that back then people ate without a care and now are apparently a little bit more sensitive in the eyes of the government.
Yeah. On the balance, I'm glad somebody's, because it's not good for the industry. If we kill somebody, if somebody's head swells up like a pumpkin, it's not good for craft distilling.
Probably not.
Right.
I would agree with that.
We can argue where you set the volume slider on TTB aggressive or FDA aggressiveness and all that. But I could tell you, as a consumer, I'm glad somebody's watching.
Yeah.
And as a business owner and a distiller, I'm glad somebody's watching too, because we could do damage to the industry, or you just need one bad incident and it's could set you back 20 years, Yeah.
I agree. You're
So
100% correct. Yeah.
So I may have been mad at the moment, but I'm overall I'm glad, and I'm glad somebody's watching.
So you have this incredible liqueur practice. You have an incredible liqueur portfolio. As you continue to build out your distillery, I mean, you've been working in distilling and producing for a year. You built out for 4 years. You're kind of you've hit an incredible stride with, especially Vidisha's, this, tikka masala liqueur. What do you think is on the horizon for, we talked a little bit about the white chartreuse. Are there any other distilled spirits that you'd like to play with, or liqueurs that you have read about that are just now like stuck in your brain?
Yeah, I've got one I've been chasing for a few years, and I'm still in the gate. I want to make the cherry liqueur.
The maraschino.
Maraschino.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maraschino.
Yes.
Tomato. Yes.
Called the whole thing off. I want to make maraschino, and the more I learn about it, the further away it feels, and the more I want it. Because there are some techniques. It's a very, very particular thing, and there's a ton of terroir in it, and the techniques have terroir. The techniques are a little bit of winemaking, a little bit of distillation, a little bit of liqueur making, and just very particular to that product. And one thing I've learned to do is how to recreate things from other parts. Like you mentioned the person, you see the parallels with my portfolio, and you mentioned like vermouth, and we're not allowed to make vermouth under my license because we're not licensed to work with wine. So but we're operating a bar, and you don't have a bar without vermouth.
No.
So I had to find a way to make vermouth without wine. And that was a long road. Because you can make a vermouth without wine. It's just, how good is it, right? I want Carpano, Antica. That's what I want.
Who doesn't want Carpano? I drink Carpano on the rocks with a big orange wedge. I love Carpano.
God, that stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
And I would always me and Robbie, because that's the real benefit of having a tasting room that's a real cocktail bar too, is you as a distiller, you could like it, but then you give it to a real mixologist and they go, it ain't Carpano. Or they'll say, it's great, but I don't know what to do with it. That feedback has been wonderful working with Robbie like that. When I developed my coffee liqueur, we took it right into the bar. That was the first thing I developed after we opened, and we took it right into the bar after every trial batch, and he would make espresso martinis from it, and it tasted great. But then you put an espresso martini, it's like, let's turn this up, let's turn that down, blah blah blah. And that feedback is great.
I love that methodology, because this is what I tell people that make gin, is that you need to know what kind of gin it is, and you need to know how it's going to play in a cocktail, because people aren't, some people might, but most people who are buying coffee liqueurs are going to put them in a cocktail. Most people who are buying gin are going to put them in a cocktail. So what kind of cocktail is it going to be? You need to know that, and you need to formulate it for that. So brilliant methodology. I preach that all the time.
And I picked that up from Derek Bell in his 2 books.
Excellent books. Derek Bell, if you guys are not familiar, Corsair,
exactly.
Yep.
And Derek, if you're listening, thank you. Because I was reading his books and I was experimenting with a lot of stuff, and he had just a proposed a hypothesis about a way to make a smoke injector to make smoked whiskeys, and I built it. And I was emailing. I just took a chance. I tried to figure out his email address, and he responded to me, and he answered a bunch of my questions, and that's when I fell in love with the culture. Like Derek freaking Bell is answering my email, and he's helping me to have a better understanding. I love that about this industry.
1,000%. It's crazy to me that like the people that I admired when I was a baby distiller are now like my friends.
You said that to me at ACSA, and we were at the tasting after the luncheon on Wednesday, and I was having people I would be talking to somebody because they were appreciating the Vidishas, and that was just a wonderful experience. As a distiller, seeing people enjoy what you make, that's it. That's it.
It's the pinnacle.
And so I'd be talking to somebody, and people would tap me on the shoulder. I just want to congratulate you. Really love it. I want to introduce myself. And half the time I turn around and say, I want to introduce myself. So I know who you are. Why do you know who I am? But what Derek said in his book is you always have to start with the end in mind. You don't just you don't just say, which I'm going to contradict myself because I started with the New Jersey tea leaf and I developed a gin around it. But you start with, here's what I want to accomplish, right? I want an Amaro that is it's not Fernet bitter, it's not Aperol bitter, it's Campari bitter, and I want it to be citrus forward or not, or I want it to be earthy, or so you have to start with what you want in mind and then go build it. And if you take a left turn, you end up somewhere else, that's fine too. But you should have a purpose when you set out in doing things. Like for me with chartreuse, I didn't set out to make a chartreuse substitute. I set out to learn. And I used chartreuse because I loved it so much. To me, if I could make chartreuse, I know how to make liqueur. But you have to have a purpose when you set out. For me anyway. This is how I like to do it. And sometimes you just throw shit against the wall and see what's going to stick. You experiment for its own sake. But if you're going to make a product, you should. I could tell you what every single product in my portfolio, what it does. Like, where would you use it? Why is it in that portfolio? There's a purpose for it in the portfolio. I just developed an Amaro that was really good. It came out of that Italian book again. I started from a recipe in that old Italian book. And I got it to a point where it was really, really good. It's really interesting. And it's the key ingredient is eucalyptus. And it's delicious. But then Robbie and I kind of like sat there drinking. It's like, this is really good, but what am I going to do with it? Where does it fit? Like, I said, well, I want spritzes. He goes, I can make spritzes from Campari, right? I can make spritzes from your Francia. Or I could build it up from it didn't fit. So we're not making it. As fun as it was to make, as delicious as it is, it's not going into the lineup. And that's one thing my wife is really great at is, she runs the business and she runs the inventory and she keeps everything organized. And when I start making a new, she goes, where are you going to put that? Where are you going to put those bottles? Do you really need that? So a discipline around what does that do in your product portfolio, I think is vital. So start with, as Derek said, start with the end in mind. What are you trying to do? What do you want this product to be? And then go figure out how to do it.
I love that. I think that is also great advice to end the episode on. You succinctly tied everything in together so perfectly. God, that's great. I'm going to needlepoint that and take it into work and put it up at my desk.
Right. So if I may, just one more thing.
Yeah, 1,000% go for it.
Vidisha's weird. Vidisha's is weird. And that's I think that's our best product, I guess. But if I were doing Vidishas now, I did Vidishas very, very early. And how Vidishas came to be, I was learning gin. And I made a connection, like when you're learning something, you go, oh my God, yeah, of course, that's why that. And I made this connection between gin and cuisine, cooking, right? And when you're distilling and when you're macerating, you're extracting oils into alcohol through dissolution or through distillation, right? Evaporation. But with cooking, you're using many of the same botanicals or similar botanicals, and you're extracting those oils with steam or boiling water, right? So there's sort of a correspondence. The techniques are different, the materials are different, but there's a correspondence too. And it got me thinking, like, with ethnic cuisines, there's patterns of botanicals that evolved over millennia, right? Lord knows India's been making great food for millennia before they wrote it down. And I'm like, well, shit, you've got all these ethnic cuisines, Italian, basil, oregano, thyme, Mexican, cilantro, Mexican oregano, and I was like, well, what's the most badass food that features botanicals? It's Indian food. And so I said, I wonder if I can make a liqueur from patterns of Indian food. And at this point, I had no idea how to make liqueur. I was learning gin at this point. And so I went to a friend of mine at work, a guy who worked on my team, and because he used to reheat his lunches, they were leftovers from the day before, and he always go, "Oh, Kashel's making lunch. Oh my God, it's incredible." So I said, Kaushal, would you ask your wife if she would share a recipe with me? Because I'd like to try to make something from it. And she gave me her family's masala recipe. And her name is Vidisha. That's where the name comes from. It's Vidisha's masala, to honor her and her sharing that recipe with me. And but I extracted it at a weird ABV. I blended it down to a weird ABV. I had a weird sugar level. If I were doing it right now, I would never get to Vidisha's because I know too much now. You know what I mean? That ignorance and the experimental. But the good thing is I didn't know what I didn't know. I was excited. I was energetic, and I didn't care if I sucked because that's where I was in my development at that point, right? I was just doing it for the pure joy of it. And then I got to Vidisha's. But so I try to remember that. Like, don't, as much as I said, start with the end in mind, break the rules. Break the rules. Don't be a slave to the rules, And if you're developing a product, you should start with the end in mind. But at the same time, you shouldn't have 100% of your time dedicated to developing a product for production. You should spend a portion of your time just fucking around. What if? I saw this recipe in a book. Let me make it. Does that go with that? And just throw away the...
It's not bad to focus on the tree in the forest. If the tree is something that brings you joy and alights your creativity and your curiosity.
You should always be doing some sort of a tree. Always. Mm-hmm. Always be... we're trying to grow the business, and I still try to experiment, and I'm still trying to figure out maraschino. God damn it, I'm going to get it.
You are going to get it. I have no doubt in my mind. Yeah,
it's killing me.
1,000%. No, you're definitely going to.
Those Italians in Dalmatia, they know what the hell they're doing. So anyway, but so just I guess what you were saying to wrap up. Also, have fun. And just keep doing something. Be uncomfortable. One of the dangers of getting good at something is that you stop letting yourself suck. And you should be sucking 20 to 30, 40% of the time. You should suck at what you're doing because it leads to the next great thing that you're going to do. That's where the great thing comes from, is when you suck.
Agree. Or when you're scared.
When you're scared.
Yeah. I do things that scare me all the time, and that's why I'm here in Kentucky.
Yeah.
I get that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bob. I have learned a lot from speaking with you. Again, huge fan. Love to see this kind of journey that you have been on and also witness it through the lens of ACSA. But before we wrap up, important reminder for listeners that for more than 30 years, G&D Chillers has had the proven solution for distilleries. Visit them today at gdchillers.com. And also, if you've enjoyed this podcast, because I know I definitely have, go to spiritsanddistilling.com and sign up for our free newsletter featuring news stories every week from some of the best writers and distillers in the distilling world. Really incredible content there, as I always say. A lot of really good reading. Bob, I know you mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast, but as a refresher for our listeners, if people want to learn more or taste for themselves what you're working on, how can they dig a bit deeper? Where can they find you? Your Instagram, your social media, your email.
So my email is bob@dismalharmony.com, dismalharmony.com. That's also our website, dismalharmony.com. So that's the best place to learn about us and to find us, and all our social. You can link to our socials from there, where you get to see what Robbie Seibert does with our spirits.
And if you're in the New Jersey area, you can go try it for yourself, and you can go buy it there as well. Because unfortunately, we didn't have time to talk about it today, but New Jersey does not have direct to consumer. So if you're in New Jersey or around New Jersey, this is a distillery worth hitting.
Please come see us.
Or still just call New Jersey legislation. Yeah. And let's talk about being able to get this liquor shipped to you. Thanks.
I've really enjoyed meeting all of my fellow distillers, and it's an amazing community that I'm very proud to be a part of. And if you're going to come visit the distillery, shoot me an email. I'd love to come out and meet you.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for being on the podcast today, Bob.
Thank you, Sydney.
We will be back in 2 weeks with another in-depth distilling conversation for you. Thank you for joining us. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who love to make and drink great spirits. Join our free newsletter today at spiritsanddistilling.com for pragmatic, technical, and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Sign up now at spiritsanddistilling.com or click on the link in the show notes.